Have you ever heard of a woman whose very name struck fear in the hearts of early Muslims? A woman so powerful, so fearless, yet so blinded by pride that Allah Himself mentioned her in the Qur'an. This is the story of Jamil, the wife of Abu Lahab, the woman who became a symbol of arrogance and hatred against Islam. But what made her so feared? And how did her power turn into her downfall? Stay tuned, as we uncover the shocking story of Jamil, the most feared woman in Islamic history, revealed. 1. Introduction to Jamil. Arwa bint Harb. Jamil, whose real name was Arwa bint Harb, was a woman of high lineage in Quraysh, belonging to the powerful Banu Umayyah clan. She was the sister of Abu Sufyan, one of Makkah's most influential leaders, and the wife of Abu Lahab, who was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam uncle. This made her one of the most well-connected women in pre-Islamic Arabia. With her sharp mind, eloquence, and commanding personality, she wielded significant influence in Makkah's social and political circles. Before the message of Islam, Jamil was admired for her confidence and beauty, often seen as a symbol of strength among Quraysh women. However, her pride and attachment to status made her despise anything that threatened her family's authority. When her husband turned against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she fully joined him, becoming one of Islam's most vocal and active opponents. Her animosity wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. She used her social position and clever words to mock the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and undermine his message publicly. In the early days of Islam, her fierce nature and fearsome reputation earned her the title of one of the most dangerous women in Makkah's opposition to the truth. 2. Her influence and power in Makkah. Jamil's influence in Makkah extended far beyond her household. As the wife of Abu Lahab and sister of Abu Sufyan, she stood at the center of Quraysh's elite society. People listened to her words and followed her lead, not only because of her family ties but also due to her strong personality and commanding presence. She had a sharp tongue and a persuasive voice that could stir crowds and ignite anger against those she opposed. Her gatherings often became platforms for spreading rumors and ridicule against the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers. Jamil understood the power of public opinion in a tribal society like Makkah. She used her wit and influence to shape that opinion, turning many against the message of Islam. Her arrogance and pride made her believe that her family's wealth and status gave her authority over truth itself. The Quraysh feared her anger and respected her determination, for she never hesitated to confront anyone who sympathized with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Through her words and actions, she became not only a symbol of defiance but also a reflection of how pride and power can blind a person to divine guidance and ultimate reality. 3. Her hatred towards Islam. Jamil's hatred for Islam was deep-rooted and relentless. From the very beginning of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mission, she saw his message as a direct threat to her family's honor and the traditions of Quraysh. What enraged her most was that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, though from her own clan, called people to abandon idol worship and embrace the worship of one God, an idea that undermined the pride and authority of Makkah's elite families. Her anger turned into open hostility, and she made it her mission to humiliate and harm the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in any way she could. She would often follow him in public gatherings, shouting insults and mocking his words to make people doubt him. Her cruelty went beyond words. She would scatter thorns and sharp branches on the paths he used, hoping to cause him pain. Her actions reflected not just hatred but deep envy and arrogance, as she couldn't accept that a humble, truthful man was chosen by Allah instead of the wealthy and powerful. Jamil's heart became hardened by pride, and instead of recognizing the light of truth, she fought it with mockery and malice, becoming one of the most infamous enemies of Islam's early message. 4. Her role in spreading anti-Islam propaganda. Jamil was not just a passive enemy, she was an active architect of anti-Islamic propaganda in Makkah. Using her intelligence and influence, she spread false rumors and exaggerated stories to discredit the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever a new verse of the Qur'an was revealed, she twisted its meaning to mock it publicly. She would go from one gathering to another, warning people not to listen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, claiming that his words were mere poetry or magic meant to divide families. Her persuasive speech and commanding tone made many hesitate to approach Islam out of fear of her ridicule. Her home became a center for discussions against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where strategies were formed to weaken his growing influence. She often encouraged others, including women of Quraysh, to taunt Muslims and isolate them socially. Her actions turned ordinary mockery into a coordinated campaign of hatred and misinformation. In a society where word of mouth shaped public opinion, Jamil mastered the art of manipulation. She weaponized speech to poison hearts against truth. By doing so, she became one of the first propagandists in Islamic history, proving how words, when used with malice, can cause greater harm than swords. 5. Revelation of Surah Al-Masad. The arrogance and hostility of Abu Lahab and Jamil reached such extremes that Allah himself condemned them in the Qur'an. In response to their persistent mockery and open rebellion, Surah Al-Masad, the palm fiber, was revealed. This short yet powerful surah is a declaration of divine justice, exposing their fate for all time. It begins with the words, "Perish the hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he," a statement that stripped Abu Lahab of all honor and worldly pride. But what shocked Makkah even more was that Jamil was also mentioned directly, though not by name, as the carrier of firewood. This phrase symbolized her role in fueling the fire of hatred and spreading slander, just as she once carried thorns to harm the Prophet ﷺ. The surah foretold that a rope of palm fiber would be around her neck, representing her humiliation in the hereafter. For a proud woman of Quraysh, this revelation was the ultimate disgrace. It showed that no status or lineage could protect one from Allah's decree. Through Surah Al-Masad, Allah immortalized the downfall of a couple who embodied pride, disbelief, and the consequences of waging war against divine truth. 6. Her reaction to the revelation. When Jamil heard that a verse of the Qur'an had been revealed condemning her and her husband, her fury reached its peak. Unable to bear the humiliation, she stormed through the streets of Makkah, holding a stone pestle in her hand, swearing that she would strike the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in revenge. Her pride was shattered. How could the Qur'an, recited publicly, expose her deeds and predict her punishment? Her anger blinded her completely, and she set out to confront the Prophet ﷺ, who was sitting near the Kaaba with Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. When she arrived, she was overcome by divine protection. Allah veiled the Prophet ﷺ from her sight. Though he was right in front of her, she could not see him. In frustration, she shouted insults and left without realizing he was there. This moment became a powerful sign of Allah's protection over his messenger and the helplessness of those who opposed him. Jamil's rage turned into helpless defeat, proving that no matter how powerful or determined one may appear, they cannot harm the one whom Allah defends. Her reaction reflected not only her anger but also the downfall of pride when confronted by divine truth. 7. Moral and lesson. The story of Jamil stands as a timeless warning against arrogance, pride, and the misuse of influence. Despite her beauty, wealth, and high status, none of it could protect her from the consequences of her hatred toward the truth. She used her power to spread enmity and falsehood, but ultimately, it led only to her disgrace. Her story shows that when a person's heart is filled with pride, they lose the ability to recognize right from wrong. The same intelligence and strength that could have earned her honor were instead used to fight the message of Allah. Surah Al-Masad immortalized her downfall as a lesson for all generations, that worldly success means nothing if it's used against righteousness. It reminds us that Allah's justice is absolute, and no human can escape it, no matter how powerful they seem. Jamil's fate teaches believers to guard their hearts from arrogance, control their words, and never mock those who stand for truth. Her legacy, though tragic, serves as a reflection of divine wisdom, that every action has a consequence, and those who use their voices for harm will face the very fire they once tried to ignite against others. The story of Jamil reminds us that pride and hatred only lead to destruction, while humility brings light and peace. May Allah protect our hearts from arrogance and fill them with wisdom and faith. If you learned something valuable today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Profound Deen for more inspiring Islamic stories. Comment below this beautiful prayer: Ya Allah, purify my heart from pride and guide me to the truth.